HR and AI, huge topic. How do you see it already reshaping the HR role inside organizations?
Well, I think in some ways AI is a nirvana for HR, because really what we have to do in HR is we have to make some really important decisions: who to hire, how much to pay people, who to promote, how to train people, with very, very inconsistent, biased data. Data that comes from managers, data that comes from surveys, data that comes from demographics, data that comes from job history, skills data. And that data is kind of hard to find. It's not always very accurate. You don't always know what data is available. And now that AI is here, we can start collecting this data and making much more informed decisions about people. So I see nothing but just enormous upside here.
For HR professionals listening to this conversation, what data should they be prioritising to ensure that they're getting the best possible output out of their AI tools?
Well, every application of AI requires different types of data. There's data for recruiting that's a little bit different from data for promotion, data for pay equity, data for employee development, career management, and so forth. The key, new discipline that is really hitting the HR department is getting that data. First of all, we don't always know where it is, collecting it and making sure that it is unbiased and reasonably accurate. So there's going to be a lot of cleanup going on in HR, looking at the data that's feeding these AI systems to make sure that it is in fact representative of the organization. And we're going to talk more about that when we talk about human intelligence.
So Josh, we're talking all about data. Let's level set. Recognition data specifically, what is it and why is it so significant?
Well, if you use a platform like WorkHuman, for example, and you build a really robust recognition program, what will happen is employees all over the organization will give other employees specific feedback, recognition, thanks, appreciation, with data about why they're saying this, what the behaviors were, what the skills were, what were the activities that created this level of recognition. So if you think about that, what you've now created is essentially a massive culture map of your company, where you're seeing all over the company the relationships between every individual and all the other people that they work with in a constant basis, because recognition can be given all the time. It doesn't have to be given once a year, like a performance appraisal. And that data set, if it's managed well by the recognition program, has information about behaviors, has information about skills, information about strengths, potential information about weaknesses, development planning information, performance information. And you can see things going on in the company at an individual level and as an organizational level that will teach you about what's working in this company and maybe what's not working, and what's working for this individual and maybe what's not working for that individual. That is one of the richest set of data that we have in a company. Now, I think most companies kind of have it anecdotally, and it's just happening day to day, maybe in a couple comments here and there. But if you build a program around it, you now have the data available for the AI to look at it and to understand what's going on in the organization.
So how can AI help companies to take advantage of recognition data?
Well, that's kind of one of the miraculous things in this whole human intelligence initiative that WorkHuman is doing. Is you might look at this as a bunch of little thank yous and kind of little anecdotes floating around the company, but if you actually get that information and consolidate it, and you have a recognition program where people actually talk about why they're giving somebody recognition and explicitly what they're recognizing people for, you now have an AI system that can look at that information and give the employee actually developmental feedback and developmental planning tools, strengths and weaknesses information for their own personal development. The manager can get insights into what's going well in their organization and perhaps what's not going as well through crowdsourced information coming from employees all over the company. And the executives, the leaders in the HR department, can look across the organization and say, here's a pocket of people that are doing really well, here's a pocket of people that aren't, or maybe they're lesser performing. What did we learn about these people versus these people, and what's going on? Can we take what these people are doing and teach these people those things? So it really has, a massive ROI using AI. If you don't have AI, you can run a bunch of reports and maybe you'll make sense of it, but the AI just unlocks it for everybody at all levels of the organization.
Speaking of human intelligence, at the core of human intelligence is that AI plus human data,
right.
And at the heartbeat of that is recognition. Why is recognition data able to be such a significant outlier relative to some of the other data points you've talked about inside organizations?
I have never met a company that likes their performance management ever, and everybody's playing with it and tweaking it and, finding ways to make it more continuous and using OKRs or, there's hundreds of ideas. The reason it's a mess is because the data is coming to one person. And usually the manager's not the one who's working with these people all day. They're working with other people in teams. So what the recognition data does is it unleashes this massive source of information from peers, from workmates, from managers in other groups about what your performance is really like, what you're really good at, what you're really excelling at, where your real strengths are, from the people that you work with every day. So if you look at the quality of data in the recognition data set versus the performance management data set, I think it's an order of magnitude more useful. Now you have to build a recognition-rich culture. You have to have tools that allow people to give employees recognition, someplace where you can store the data, and tools to prevent the recognition from just being, hey, great job. That doesn't teach anybody anything. What did they do? How did they do it? To be specific about recognition. But basically what the research shows is that companies that have learned how to use recognition as a strategic part of their management culture far outperform their peers. We actually did a study more than a decade ago of high recognition companies versus low recognition companies through all sorts of data. And we found that companies that are good at employee recognition in all of its aspects have 70% lower voluntary attrition.
So you talked a lot there about how human intelligence has this ability to unlock individual potential, but I'd love you to speak a little bit more about how it can unlock team potential and really empower that cultural piece as well.
Well, we just did a big body of research we call the dynamic organization, and we looked at companies that evolve quickly and companies that don't evolve, and of course the ones that don't evolve tend to go away. And what you find is the companies that evolve quickly thrive on a meritocracy. They thrive on honest conversations. They thrive on discussion about skills and capabilities. And so building a recognition program, and I don't even want to call it a program, it's really a culture and a behavior of recognition, of teaching people how to do this and encouraging it and role modeling it. You can create a much more dynamic organization because there's more real-time feedback on what's really working and what behaviors are creating success. So I think organizationally, it allows companies to be more adaptable. It definitely gives people a higher sense of belonging in the company because they're getting feedback and they're getting recognition for their work. It allows people to develop their skills because they're being coached by other people on what their weaknesses may be. And it just creates a more, integrated culture of connectivity between the organization because people you work with that you might not have a developmental conversation with will give you developmental information through a recognition program that they may feel uncomfortable doing face-to-face on a normal basis. So there's just all sorts of good things that come from it.
Let's stay on the skills piece if we can, because there's a huge conversation in HR and in companies writ large about how do we prepare our workforce for the skills needed for the future. What role do you see human intelligence playing in helping bridge that gap?
Well, the skills topic has become just red hot. I mean, everybody's talking about, developing skills, assessing skills, upskilling people, getting databases of skills from the outside world to try to figure out what skills we don't even know we need. I mean, most organizations are filled with people who know what to do because they've done it. They're experts in a domain, they've worked in the profession or the industry a long time, they've succeeded in the organization, they understand how the organization works, and what we want them to do is share their insights on the skills that make a difference, the skills that matter, and how they learn those skills. How do we get that out of people? One of the best ways to get that out of people is through recognition. Because if you recognize people in a structured way and have information in the recognition about their skills and about why somebody has succeeded and what we're recognizing people for, it's going to be filled with skills information. And we're going to be able to look at that. And this is what WorkHuman has proven, is you can look at this vast amount of recognition data and you can see reinforce patterns of certain skills that are driving success in the organization. And by the way, they may not be the things that are written on the wall.
Or in the job description.
Or in the job description. They may be things that are sort of implicit in the culture of the organization that people aren't talking about, but they're there. So it's very, very valuable source of information.
And what about the resiliency piece? I mean, we're talking a lot about how do we build resilient organisations, one that can face into uncertainty, that can endure difficulty. Any insights there around recognition's role in the resiliency equation?
Yeah, I really think if I go back to the dynamic organization research I talked about a minute ago, when people feel comfortable and they're given a sort of a tool set and they're taught how to give others recognition, you create a feedback culture. Even though recognition is intended to be positive, it's a form of feedback. And the more feedback you have in the company, the smarter the company gets. Because all of the good, I mean, not all of the good ideas, but a lot of the good ideas come from the front line. They don't come from the head of strategy or the CEO. A lot of it comes from the people doing the work. And so when they're giving recognition and talking about activities in the line of business itself, that information is flowing and the company can see where it needs to improve. So I think this is a huge factor in high-performing companies.
Now, we've touched on aspects of employee engagement a little bit. You've mentioned, elevating out of mundane tasks, getting more feedback. But let's speak to it a little bit more directly. How do you see human intelligence impacting the employee experience?
So what happens in employee experience is the poor person who's trying to figure out what the employee experience is, looks at all of these constellation of issues and picks things to work on. What the feedback data and the recognition data does is it shows you very specifically what the high priority issues are that are making a difference to your peers. And so all of a sudden employee experience isn't so complicated. The other thing that's interesting about employee experience and recognition is there's this oxytocin effect, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's been data that's proven when you give somebody positive recognition, you as a giver of recognition feel better. Physically and emotionally you feel better, and the person receiving the recognition feels better too. Oxytocin is actually created in your body. So you actually create positive energy through this process of recognition. It sounds like a big feedback process, but actually it's a very human process. So there's a lot of positive benefits that come out of this that high-performing companies just do. Another
thing, a hypothesis I'd love to run by you and see if you agree with it, is it sort of makes the age of personalisation, which we've talked about for a long time, possible in the ability to tailor, because we've got this rich set of data, but it can also be trained on the individual or on different teams. Can you speak a little bit to just what it opens up in that regard and how that will impact employee experience?
Well, yeah, I think if you think about a recognition-rich culture where people are talking to each other and thanking them and appreciating and explaining what it is that they appreciate about them, everybody's getting a personal experience. Everybody's recognition, set is different. And so instead of you having to sit down in HR and figure out what the employee experience roadmap looks like and build a bunch of personas for each person, people are getting personal development based on their needs, their strengths, and their weaknesses automatically from others. In some sense, it is the most personalizable way to run a company is to have a lot of recognition.
So Josh, what excites you most about the future of HR?
Well, many, many things, but in particular, the ability to use AI and data like the human intelligence from WorkHuman to empower people, to empower managers, to empower organizations, to empower HR, to make better decisions, to improve performance, to get better feedback, to give people better development, to create a positive work environment. That is really exciting to me because I know it's going to result in companies improving their financial performance and their business performance as well.
Fantastic. Well, Josh, thank you so much for such an illuminating conversation. I share your enthusiasm. I can't wait to see how this human intelligent future plays out. Thank you for being with us.
You bet.